Yeah. Well, hello. This is Chris with HazmatandRescue.com. And first, I'd like to thank Chief Kaler for letting us use his amazing fire station with all of his great classic fire apparatus for our recording that we're working right now, currently in our second year of Hazmat operations ongoing. There's a lot of great videos with Brett Storr, with Craig Dyer, and many of our other instructors. So we decided to take a quick break in our recording of continuing videos to talk about this newsletter. So we have our next ongoing newsletter, and the previous one that we talked about was carbon dioxide incidents. I've got Brad here recording with a much better camera than I had last time, so I want to take advantage of that. And of course, I got somebody much smarter than me, Craig Dyer. Thank you, Craig.
Not at all.
We are going to be talking about natural gas explosions. I've noticed that they've been happening a lot recently, and we've gotten a few pieces of good information from a few sources through some of our instruction that I've had recently. And that would be from Captain Jeff Pfaff of Yakima Fire Department. So thank you very much, Captain Pfaff. No relation. He's just a good training captain over there in Yakima that put together a very good worksheet with a few propane explosions that happened up in the Cascade Mountain Range in Washington State over the winter. And then, of course, Division Chief Tom O'Connor from Vancouver Fire Department in Washington State, he gave us a really good after action for an event that happened a few years back when he was in Canby, Oregon, which did harm a few firefighters. So I just want to make sure that people are safe when we sit there and talk about natural gas, propane, and gasoline type of explosions inside structures. So of course I have my computer for my notes, so I am going to be popping on down here. We'll see a few YouTube video links that I'm going to push up on this newsletter for you to take a look at. But the biggest thing is, this is a natural gas emergency or a propane emergency, sometimes a gasoline emergency, but the whole thing comes down to those vapors get confined into an area, whether it be a building, whether it be a vault, sometimes even a car. So we have to be very aware of this accumulation of these gases when they get within their lower explosive limit and their upper explosive limit. So I'm working with Craig here to talk about some of the identifying marks that we would have when we have a response for just a natural gas leak, for a propane leak, for possibly a smell of gasoline in the area, and what we need to think about for the potential for an explosion. Craig, you got any notes you want to say while I'm scrolling right now?
I think it's just good to be familiar with how to use the ERG. It's a valuable tool, and the more familiar you are with it through ongoing training, just taking a glance at it, the more comfortable you'll be in the chaotic first few minutes of any time you might need to use this. So keep on top of the book and with the changes with each progressive addition.
Craig, do we have any video series for ongoing training for the ERG on
we actually do. We have some great videos that talk about the 4 different sections inside the ERG, the yellow and blue section, the orange section, and perhaps the most confusing and difficult one for people to understand is the green section. So yeah, I think if we could focus to those videos, that was a great way to keep up to date on some of the changes and some quick tips on how to use the ERG effectively on a scene.
Now, did you know that we also have those videos now going to hazmattv.com, and that class will be available soon? I think it's going to be just under $25 for all 4 of those videos.
That's a great value. $24 for 4 videos. That is fantastic. It's a great price. And I remember shooting one of those videos, and they're fantastic, and I hope you enjoy them as well.
It was a fun time, wasn't it? So let's get back to the gas explosions, and we're sitting there taking a look. One of the big ones that could possibly happen is gasoline explosions. So gasoline or vapors from hydrocarbons or other events, they're going to take us to guide page 128. Now this is for flammable liquids. They are going to produce a certain amount of vapors depending on the temperature as we go through this. So Craig has the book open for guide page 128. And if you want to just take a quick spattering on some of those bullet points that we see there on the awareness page on how we protect ourselves and the public to include our initial isolation distance, it would help our viewers here.
Well, it says here 50 meters, which we all know is 150 feet. That tells me that it's a liquid that we need to stay back 150 feet. If it becomes a large spill, then 300 feet is recommended, or 300 meters is recommended. If it's a large spill, 300 meters is recommended.
How many feet would it be?
1,000.
There we go.
1,000 for a large spill, which is a spill over 55 gallons.
So we do need to know our meters and our feet. So that gives us that initial isolation. And then, of course, we have our operations page. Of course, it's not on fire right now. It would be a spill or leak. Can you just give me some of those bullet points for spill or leak right now?
Well, most certainly. For a small fire, dry chemical or CO2 is the preferred firefighting method. Water spray or regular foam could work depending on some of your circumstances, but remember, water and gas don't mix necessarily. With a large fire, a water spray or regular foam could be helpful because of the high volumes of heat that are produced. Moving on, is that what you wanted?
Well, pretty much we were looking at fire there. What about spill or leak? Is there anything?
Well,
if we didn't have an ignition source,
if we didn't have an ignition source,
we just have vapors.
We know that those vapors are looking for an ignition source. So we want to secure all ignition sources the best we can for a good space to make sure that the gases, as they come off of the liquid, stay outside or have no ignition sources within their projected flammable range. So we want to make sure that all ignition sources within the circle of its flammable range are turned off.
So no lighting up cigarettes when we're on the scene. Got it. What about like light switches or garage door openers or anything like that? Is that a big enough ignition source really to light these things off?
It actually is. That's a great question. And even the idea of turning a light off, it creates a spark that if it does have a flammable atmosphere around it, will cause an explosion. So things like just turning the lights off, turning the lights on, or even something as seemingly beneficial as pulling the smoke detector or pulling the pull station to activate the building's fire alarm, that too could cause a spark that could catch an entire motel on fire, for example, and cause an explosion.
That's what happened in Bremerton, right?
Oh, yeah, that is what happened in Bremerton, yeah. So it's hard to know that, and it's hard to know exactly what the flammable, the atmosphere is for its flammable range, especially if you don't know what's leaking, and you want to help the most people. Just be cautious with those things too.
So, like I talked about with the chief in Vancouver, he gave us the heads up with Canby, Oregon, and that was another issue. So, Bremerton, we had the pull station actually ignited that explosion and that subsequent fire that happened. Down in Oregon, the firefighters were actually in the garage, and I think they were trying to turn the light switch off. I can't be 100% correct on that. I know they were either turning it off or on, but I do think that they were trying to turn the light off, and that's when the ignition actually occurred because of the spark in there. So we have to be very careful for those ignition sources. Even a tiny little spark from a fire alarm or a light switch can be one of the issues. Now, of course, we just talked about gas in the vapors. That doesn't happen very often, but it does occur, and it can occur in things like low-lying areas like vaults or sewers. So one big thing that we have to watch out for is that explosive range being found in a low-lying area. Because when we sit there and take a look at the vapors coming from hydrocarbons like gasoline, diesel, or some of our volatile hydrocarbons like that, where do those vapors travel? Do they go up or do they go down?
Well, that's a very interesting point. Most gases go down. Most flammable gases go down. There's only some that go up. So if you don't know, then guess that flammable vapors are going to hug the ground. But that's where we have to look at the physical properties and preferably the SDS, or look online or do some other research to find out where those vapors are going to go. If the vapor density is less than 1, then they're going to go up into the atmosphere, which is a good thing for us because they disperse quite a bit faster than if the vapor density is greater than 1. It will sink to the ground and pool. It tends to pool up in the low-lying areas. It tends to not disperse quite as rapidly, and it could be trapped within its flammable range and really cause problems down the road.
And once again, we have a few of those videos posted up on the newsletter for us as we go through that. So also, more importantly, are the gases like propane and natural gas. And natural gas, unlike the vapors that we just talked about with our hydrocarbons, that goes up, right?
Sorry, I was distracted.
For methane and natural gas, does that go down or up, Craig?
Methane goes up.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
If you remember the acronym 4H Metacana, which it's an acronym. Nerd. 4H Metacana, those are the gases that go up. And there's a very few of them that are. And methane is within the metacana, which goes up. So methane is one of those. Also some illuminating gases, which are the gases that you'd find that light up the torches for the street lamps and whatnot. People's houses and some of the older neighborhoods.
Oh, in 1885, we still, okay, there we go. So we do have that issue. So potentially attics or high areas in a house, we may have gas accumulation for a natural gas emergency. What about propane? Does that go up as well? Because it's the same type of gas. We use it for the same things.
It is, but there's no P in the 4-H Medic Anna is a good way to remember it.
I like the silent P, so it could still be in there.
You are the captain of the silent P. But there's no P in 4-H Medic Anna, so propane would go down and hug the ground, whereas natural gas would float up and go away. And
so for those propane emergencies, we might have to look at basements or, once again, those utility vaults or sewers, things like that, because that propane may accumulate in those low-lying areas. Right?
Absolutely, and even indoors where your kitchen is. So if the wind is blowing in the house and you have your barbecue outside, any propane that leaks out and gets blown into your kitchen, a lot of explosions have happened because of refrigerator condensers sparking on. Just cycling on causes an explosion inside a house from vapors that have wafted in. So it's good to know those.
And while I'm going to sit here and talk for a second, if you want to flip on over to guide page 115, which is our response page for our flammable gases, if we take a look at that. If I recall from Captain Pfaff in his paper and his report, these fires and explosions subsequently happened in Roslyn and Cle Elum and some of these areas up in the mountains during the winter. And I think the biggest reason for this was snow accumulation blocking exit drafts or vents for some propane and other products, because they end up getting tons and tons of feet of snow. When we sit there and take a look at it, we're looking at 8, 10, 15 feet of snow, and that was actually blocking exhaust vents, which was letting those gases accumulate within the structure. And because they don't have natural gas up there, they have propane, it was just sitting there lying low. And of course, sometimes the houses were unoccupied, some of them unfortunately were occupied, and then we saw the explosion. So we have guide page 115 right there. Why is a gas explosion inside a house, a car, a vault, why is it so much more energetic than what we see from a normal barbecue, or if we just saw a vent flaring from something like that? Why is there so much energy going on right there?
Well, that's a great question. The energy is confined within a closed space. So if you have all that energy concentrated in a small space, it's going to have a bigger impact on the structure that's around it. And that holds the energy, and when it has the energy to release and break through all that structure, that energy is transmitted out a little bit more. Whereas outside, there's nothing to confine those gases, so they waft away, and then as the reaction happens, the fire reaction happens, there's less of an impact because the energy is distributed out into space, into the air. So it doesn't have anything to control the energy, and it's released a lot easier.
So these flammable gases, of course, we're just talking about all the explosions there, but on the flammable gases, here on guide page 115, we're looking once again at that left page, which is our awareness, in essence, page, helping ourselves, protecting the public, identifying what our PPE options are. Is there anything that we see in there, the bullet points that are pretty big, like what the hazards are, what our isolation distance would be, etc., things like that?
Well, yeah, you can look at the potential hazards, and the first thing listed is fire and explosion. Tells me I'm more likely to have a fire problem than a health hazard problem. But I still read those, and vapors could cause dizziness or asphyxiation, which is an important thing to make sure you monitor your air, that you still have a good oxygen environment for breathing. It can produce irritating and or toxic gases. So another reason to not breathe this stuff. Moving down, you get to protective clothing, and you can read that and make sure that you have your SCBA, and firefighting clothing is appropriate. But getting down here for immediate precautionary measure, 100 meters, which 330 feet.
There we go.
330 feet. Now that's just the immediate precautionary measure. You have a large spill, you need to get up to about a half mile of a radius of protecting people and things downwind. Now, if it's on fire, it could be a little bit more. You could have up to a mile in all directions, but that's for other hazards, to protect against other hazards too.
I don't think we need to worry about the BLEVE right now, because those houses aren't a BLEVE, right? Those houses are a lot of energy, but it's not a BLEVE, right?
A BLEVE is a specific condition, so yes.
So that's a lot of the awareness page. What about the operations side, which gives us our incident action plan of either fire, spill or leak, or first aid? I think we're probably looking at spill or leak, I'm guessing. Maybe we probably need to take a glance at some of the fire things as well.
Well, considering the potential hazards, fire is listed first. Let's go ahead and look at the fire emergency response guidelines. The first bullet point is do not extinguish a leaking gas fire until the gas leak can be stopped. And that's an important point, because as long as the leak is on fire, it's consuming the product and not causing a problem down the road. So if you put out the fire, now you're releasing all the flammable vapors to go find that fire party. And so you want to leave that fire going, protect the exposures and make sure nobody gets hurt, and make sure you follow all fire related protections and precautions, but leave that fire going until you can stop the leak. And that might take a while. Maybe you need to wait for other resources to come around. For spill or leak though, now we have things that want to catch on fire. Because it's not on fire, we've already decided that if it's on fire, we do these particular actions. If it's not on fire, we need to protect against it catching on fire. So we want to eliminate all ignition sources, smoking, flares, sparks, flames, etc., from an immediate area. Don't walk through this material. Just don't walk through it. It's not a good thing. But here's a caution. For liquid nitrogen gas, do not apply water, regular or alcohol resistant foam directly on a spill. Use a high expansion foam whenever available. Why is that, Chris? Okay. We could skip that section.
Yeah. And I think let's get back into the explosion, the compressive effects of a gas explosion. I have the other field guide here. We got the Hazmat field guide from Jeffrey Zintek, and he has on common incidents. A lot of the things that we saw right here on guide page 115 and 128 respectively. But this is for a natural gas emergency checklist. It talks about sizing up the situation, determining the number and condition of any victims. We have to determine that incident action plan that we could use from the ERG. There's a lot of different items here, but of course they start talking more specifically about monitoring. They say that we need to have 2 monitors to back up and follow up what our readings are. Now, this isn't an air monitor class. When we sit there and take a look at it, for a natural gas or propane or a gasoline type of emergency, we do need a gas meter, correct?
Yes.
And now what are we reading and what are we trying to find for these types of events? Are we looking at carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen cyanide, or what are we looking at?
Well, primarily we're going to look for the lower explosive limit, which is, it carries some misconceptions. So we're not looking for the lower explosive limit. This doesn't alarm at a lower explosive limit. This lowers at 10% of the lower explosive limit. And that gives us a warning to make sure we stay back before we get into the dangerous atmospheres.
So a good 10 to 1 protection factor that we see,
Yes.
which is required by OSHA when we sit there and take a look at propane, which has a lower explosive limit of 2.1%, which is 21,000 parts per million. 10% of that is 2,100 parts per million. And they list the immediately dangerous to life and health value for propane at 2,100 parts per million. And it says it's 10% of the LEL. So you can see this really awesome information on our Hazmat field guide, or our Hazmat air monitor card, which you can get at hazmatandrescue.com. And it shows right there, I have the LEL sensor alarming at 10%, and it's in red, and it says ventilate/evacuate if O2 levels exceed 23.5% or if LEL levels exceed 10%. So we're measuring a percentage of the LEL. So that's a pretty good tool. We want to make sure we have 2 of those. Other things that we probably want to think about for an emergency like this is we got to make sure we call the gas company for these pipeline emergencies, looking at that more specifically, and work with either the vendors for gasoline, for propane, or natural gas to get their assistance, because they're the experts in the field for this, right? Not us. Like, they're more...
It's always good to use a subject matter expert, and those could also be identified in the local emergency response plan. So if you don't know exactly where to go, consult your local emergency response plan for guidance on that.
And we have a few other really good tools when we're just talking about gas pipelines for natural gas, or even other flammable liquids or types of pipelines out there. The National Pipeline Mapping System, which is a service that's provided. You'll find that information in the back of the white pages. The front white pages, on the back few pages, we have the NPMS. We have the web page for that. We'll put that in the newsletter as well. And a brand new app, I've been talking to some of the partners about this. It's called Bixus. Let me scroll on back to make sure I say it properly. Buxus, I'm sorry, B-U-X-U-S. And I ended up downloading that app on my smartphone. And I've been able to find out that Washington State, for where I live right now, for where we're at, has exactly no pipelines at all. Would you believe that, Craig?
I would believe that.
So they have not migrated it up to our area up here in the Northwest, but Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, the East Coast, there's a lot of pipelines on there. And it looks like it has a lot of promise to help us out with easy information at our fingertips. Now, we've talked about some pipeline emergencies. We've talked about the issues that we have to worry about. The last thing that I'm kind of worried about here, Craig, is to measure that gas to make sure that we figure things out. I have to go into the building, correct?
Well, there are some instruments that to make it so you don't have to go into the building to get a gas percentage reading.
Cool, and that's another one that I'll throw up there. There's a few companies, right? We have GasoScan and Sensit. They both come out with laser air monitors. They can actually shoot a laser through a window, and we can collect our concentrations of an environment without having to go on in. But some of the other things that we do have to think about with these, we have to watch out for those ignition sources. We have to ventilate that structure. We have to make sure we watch out for that accumulation to get within that flammable range, because we get that compressive strength as we're looking at this. Some of those other things. What else do we have here? We got to make sure we're in full PPE with bunker gear and SCBA, right, Craig?
It is a fire hazard, so
Yeah.
yes, we want
pull out the
all of
hose
that.
line. All right, we got to pull out the hose line. Do a
Have
few
a
of the things
precautionary
like
hose line ready to go. Have a rescue team ready with their air packs turned on to go and rescue us if as needed. But definitely, the SCBA is the prime choice.
that. Okay. And the biggest thing I think throughout all this is we go on natural gas emergencies, we go on odor investigations, we go on calls like this all the time, and we don't think too much of it. Of course, we pull out our air monitors, we try to identify things like that. But the biggest thing from the videos that you're going to see here in this newsletter is that this goes bad, and it goes bad fast, right? So we have to watch out for that. Make sure we get the monitors out. Make sure we have the PPE and hose lines deployed just in case this may occur. And make sure we ventilate and keep everything safe. I guess the last part that I thought I forgot right there was gas migration. We can always smell our natural gas because of the mercaptan that's put in there, right?
Yes, and that's not attached to the gas molecules. So there is a separation between the odorizing agent and the flammable vapors.
So there's that potential that it can migrate through the dirt and into an environment, and we may not even smell that natural gas, and then we can get into that flammable range and we can have that issue. So these are just some of the few notes that we have. Once again, this is not an all-inclusive incident action plan. It's just some pointers, some thoughts that we can have when it comes down to these natural gas, propane, and gasoline vapor emergencies. Anything you got left for the good of the order there, Craig?
Watch your air monitors and stay safe.
There we go. For hazmatandrescue.com, this has been Chris and Craig.